do pretty well, but the MCF would probably help a little bit. So.
Yeah. Okay. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, the motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Colclough, Councillor Gisbert, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. There's an item there just regarding rescheduling there, so there's a committee of the whole amending motion. To make that. Really?
We don't want more meetings.
There's an item to add some meetings, Will. You in favor?
Well, I'm in it for
Councillor Neers, seconded by Councillor Haney.
So the question
Yes.
is, probably through you to staff, is there a huge anticipation that this is needed?
Yeah, go ahead.
The additional one?
The additional one is needed given the topics, the two topics, and the length of time that's needed for the discussion. So the DCC bylaw review, we'd be having Coors come in and do a presentation, so it doesn't suit to a council meeting. It's generally done at a committee of the whole meeting.
Okay.
And then the council procedure bylaw, the draft for discussion.
Okay. That makes sense.
The other request is to move the meeting up an hour earlier for your next financial plan meeting. It's to ensure you have sufficient time. So that will be starting at 6 instead of at 7.
Okay. Well,
Which the other ones have started at 6.
So they're okay.
Councillor Colclough?
Just for clarification, so the DCC one would be on the
21st.
21st. Okay. I can live with that.
The 7th is still financial plan.
Yep.
Dedicated.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Colclough?
Spring break for the kids that week, or 2 weeks. I won't be in the country.
Which 2 weeks is that?
Starts the 17th. Yeah.
Okay.
2 weeks.
Yeah, this year.
Yeah, they changed it
Every
this
other
year.
year, yeah.
How come you're in the country?
What's that?
How come you're in the country?
How come I'm in the country? I'm not allowed to go anywhere.
Better question would be, what's John Runner from?
To be more specific.
Okay, any further discussion? Do note that March 21st one is a committee of the whole.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, OCP plan review. Frank's put together a report, and it has some questions or things to consider with respect to the OCP side of things. Staff got anything additional you'd like to kind of add? To give you the opportunity in case you thought of something different.
It's pretty sure it's kind of a preamble of why we bring this report forward. So essentially the report lays out that yes, we're aware of the terms of reference has been scheduled as part of the strategic plan. However, given the conversations we've heard from council in varying degrees, staff are becoming a little more unclear in regards to what council wishes us to do. So we just want to get some clarity so we move forward properly.
Okay. Councillor Cole.
There's a motion that you saw my email earlier probably, or over the weekend, whatever it was. So I have a motion here that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council instructs staff to begin the official community plan review process in 2016, and further the Council approves funding in the financial plan of $55,000 in 2016 and $55,000 in 2017, and funding from surplus.
There's second for that. Second by Councillor Gisbert. Discussion. Councillor Colclough?
Yes. Yeah, I just think it's 12 years old. It's a high priority on our strategic plan, and I think we should get on with it.
Okay. 16. Councillor Neer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, I have a question about the item D. The length of the process, generally between 12 to 18 months. I know under discussion, and it can change, but under discussion, we talked about more like probably a 9 to 12 or slightly more month process. So maybe you could give us, or give me, an indication of a kind of structure that you would have in mind that would guide this process?
Sure. Yeah, the reason for the range in time, it really depends on the amount of, I guess it depends on how robust you want the review to be. Right? So in this case, what I assume is a comprehensive review of the entire document. So, not a minor review, a total review because of the age of the document. And so generally what that would entail is obviously going out to RFP, selecting our consultants, and then the process in which council wants to monitor the review process itself. So in a lot of circumstances, you might establish an advisory committee to oversee the process to ensure that there's enough public input. And it'll be up to council to determine the scope, if you will, of that committee. So that generally the role isn't for the committee to write the document, but to ensure that it's adequate for public consultation. And that's really where it varies, is how robust do you want that consultation process to be? Do you want it to be simple information meetings held at certain points during the process and solicit feedback then, or does it involve that plus going out to various events and setting up a booth and trying to generate comments that way, establishing a web page and again generating comments? And so at each stage, so there'll be an information gathering stage, if you will, and presentation of background information, and then there'll be a sort of a general discussion with the community around their likes and dislikes of the document. And then there's the component where you actually sit down, you put pen to paper and start to formulate the policies, hopefully reflective of the comments that have been heard and the general feeling of the vision of the community. You bring it back to the community and there's dialogue between ourselves, the community at large, various stakeholder groups and so forth. So by the time you coordinate all those various meetings, you could easily burn through 12 months.
Yeah.
A 9-month OCP review, comprehensive OC, is a fairly aggressive, and everything's got to go tickety-boo. And it's been my experience that, and it doesn't, unfortunately, you don't complete it within 12 months. There's always something that comes up. And we try to accommodate that through the terms of reference and so forth. The goal is always to try and complete it as quickly as possible and get on with the next stage of work for the community. But the reality is scheduling, timing, all the interactions that you have with the community at large, delays happen along the way. And so that's the reason for the sort of the 6 months involved in the 18 months.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Haynes?
So given that, I'm a little bit confused as what our goal is here with regards to the OCP review, because I'm hearing this very short time frame versus more realistically 12 to 15 month time frame, which is the last OCP review took 19 months. If we're looking to target just specific properties in the community, then I think we need to say that. Or if we're really, as the report writer said, looking to do a comprehensive review, I think we have to give the time for that. The biggest thing is in the last OCP review, and I think, and I'll bet my life on it, that most people in this community are pretty happy with the last OCP review, because it was all inclusive. We had the kitchen meetings. We had lots of opportunity for residents to get involved and provide input. I think if we go and try and force this through aggressively, people are going to start to question what is it we're really trying to do here. So I think we have to try and recognize that with all the vested interests that we need to take the time to do this right. It's 12 months or 12 years, so it's time to update it. I agree with that, but I think we have to give it the time that it's due. We're putting the money towards it that it's due, so we certainly should give it the time. I don't think we should be trying to pigeonhole this into a 12-month period, especially with a 2-month break for summer in there, because then we're talking 10 months, right? There's just no way in reality that can happen. So I think we have to be more realistic on our time frames.
Councillor Gilmore.
So, feeding off of Councillor Haim's comments, I wasn't part of the review, so I don't know. But if the community was generally happy with the OCP that was developed in 2005, then presumably that relates to the parts of the community that have been developed. But there's the other parts of the community that haven't been developed. So I'm looking at a map and I see roads and houses, and then I see green spaces where no development has taken place. So personally, I would be in the aggressive camp saying the OCP review should probably direct itself to the open spaces on the map that haven't been developed. We have developers in the wings. They're waiting for the goalposts to go up to see what they can and can't do. And I agree with Councillor Haim that the community input is important, and whether that's meetings or questionnaires going out to see what they would like to see, and then you put that into the mixer and see what comes out. Personally, we had some lovely kids here last summer. I recall being with Mayor Haim down at Huddlestone Park, and it was the Master's Planning class from VIU. Pam Shaw was the instructor, and they seemed like they were really keen, and I know they went through our community and they were doing a project and they saw different things. I think, personally, that I would like to see a group like that involved, if for no other reason, to have an outside set of eyes being an interface, so to speak. An interface to go through the community, to maybe ask questions, maybe collate to collect questionnaires, and then to be able to report back to whoever's doing the OCP and council ultimately, but getting some local content. I think we've got a tremendous university, and I think it's a great department, this planning department, master's degree program. Wouldn't that be neat to be able to say we're using the local talent to help in our own OCP, and what an advantage for these students to be able to come to a community like Lanceville where there's all these open spaces that they can come up with their own ideas and see what the public would like to do. That's just my preference.
Councillor Korpach.
I agree with Councillor. It's been 12 years, so it's not like it's only been 5, like sometimes is the case. So there's been quite a bit of time. There's been quite a few changes in the community. There's been some turnover in the community. There have been many changes in just the direction that local planning is going with sustainability and other things like that. So, when I look at this, and I've been involved in quite a few OCP review processes, there's a bit of a rhythm to it. As Councillor Haim says, you don't do public consultation in the summer. So ideally what you want to do is you want to get underway before the summer, get some public consultation, suspend the public consultation during the summer where staff or the consultants can do a bunch of the work, come back in September with something to present. So I think that this is, my preference would be to see something, or at least aim for something like a 15-month, where if we were to start in about April, it would carry through, there'd be some work done in the spring, then pick it up again in September and go through, but finish by June, so you're not then waiting through another summer. So, it's, and plus the other thing, I guess, is one of the first steps is going to be to go out to the public and say, what do you like and what don't you like? If everybody says, don't dare touch this, then chances are we won't dare touch that. So,
If you want to get re-elected.
well, so like I said, I think that, if we could get it underway in the foreseeable future and get going before the summer, we would have April to June, which is about 15 months. Takes into account the fact that there's summer, there's Christmas, there's some other times in there where not a lot's going to get done, at least in the public consultation process.
Okay. Additional? Councillor Coulson.
How do the collective we, see economic development and branding fitting into this? Those are two things we spoke about at our strategic plan session. Branding obviously can impact the direction the OCP process might go, and economic development as well. Do we see those being incorporated into the review process, skipped? If we're planning an April start for OCP, that doesn't leave much time for these other two things, if we're going to do it. The third one I had, is surplus I don't believe we've seen a number for surplus, so can this actually come out of surplus?
Through your worship, sorry, unless the councillor had their hand up.
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just looking down, so I was writing. To answer Councillor Coulson's questions, yes, there is money in the surplus. It was come from the Director of Finance before the meeting. In regards to the comments, yeah, Councillor Coulson's absolutely correct. To which comes first, chicken and egg argument, which we run into with things that are somewhat parallel in their objectives. One could make the case that the OCP, from the OCP, a vast majority of information can be gathered to assist with economic development and branding as it lays out the overall framework to the community. On the other hand, if council wished to start with the branding and or economic development, that would greatly impact the OCP. So regardless of what your starting point is, they're all going to play into each other one way or another.
Councillor Coulson?
Oh, I think you're first.
Yeah, that's okay.
I didn't have it on the list.
Oh,
It's 'cause you missed
I'll put it on the list now. How's that?
With regards to the surplus, if we could get a continuity schedule from the Director of Finance, leaving off from our 2015 budget numbers, just so I can see what's come and gone, that would be helpful. With regards to economic development, I'd like to see it kind of run in tandem. I'd like us to get going on applying for that grant, and really for the most part, I see that as consultant work. It's not really, because we're looking at the economic development strategy, because we're looking to do something through the ICT, I thought, program. So if we could get that grant, then, because it's something really, in my opinion, that's beyond the expertise of any of us here. It's something that an outsider is going to have to come in and say, you know, this is what really is viable to a large extent in a small community that's bedroom of Nanaimo, right? We're not going to have a clue, and no offense to the residents, I don't think most of the residents will know what's economically viable here. We really need an outside agency to help us with that. So I'd like to sort of see them run in tandem.
Councillor Coulson?
I agree. I like the idea of incorporating the economic development and the branding into the OCP process. For one thing, there are a lot of synergies there. I suspect that in both economic development and branding there would be public consultation. There would also be a level of public consultation on both of them to do with the business community, is separate from the general public. So there again, it could go hand in hand with the OCP and concurrently be part of the OCP.
Councillor Coulson and Councillor Neary.
Yeah, no, I agree. Last meeting we talked about the village core plan as well, and having that roll into the OCP process. So, you know, it all flows. The economic development feedback might guide what happens with village core, elsewhere here, what have you. So they all feed each other. So as long as we're aware of that and what we're trying to achieve, great.
Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think some really important points have been raised, and I'm in agreement with all the previous speakers. This is really complex, but the problem with really complex scheduling and complex issues is there's a tendency to just become, you know, what's termed to experience paralysis by analysis. You keep sitting back and talking and talking and talking and talking in circles about what you want to achieve, and never actually taking the plunge to make it happen. And I think we have to kind of hold our noses and go for it. I will support the premise, the basic principle of this motion, because I think we need to set something in play that starts to make all this happen. I agree, I absolutely agree the economic development piece. Is that something that we're going to conduct in-house? Probably not, so that can go parallel. My feeling is the branding is kind of, identity will emerge from all three of these components and could be actually integrated as part of the OCP review. You know, vision, where we want to go and where we see ourselves and how we see ourselves, who we are now. Well, one feeds the other, and I think the branding will kind of emerge from that, but I'm not sure whether it should be an actual individual separate process or whether it should be just folded in and up, but I think it is very, very closely linked.
Councillor Swain.
Yeah, so a question to the chair of the staff. In terms of OCP, is it possible for the report to be phased in the sense that is it possible to focus on, or at least getting the water part out before another component such as development and other areas of OCP?
I mean, in terms of collecting background information?
Well, not necessarily collecting background information, but just actually doing it in segments or phases.
I guess the one risk to doing it that way is that you run the risk of extending out the timelines if you're going to do it in chunks like that. And the other thing too is what happens is if you're just talking about water today without seeing sort of the rest of the stuff, how does that impact the environment? How does that impact open space? How does that impact commercial component? It's hard for folks to get a sense of the big picture. I mean, it's a complicated exercise to begin with. And really, it's you're trying to look at the bigger picture for the community, right? And if you're just releasing bits and pieces, it might be difficult for folks to.
Yeah. Well, I guess my concern is that we're already underway with water, and then all of a sudden we're going to put the brakes on for 18 months potentially.
No.
I'm hoping not, but it's just. If we're going to be doing this complete OCP review, which I am actually for, it's just my concern is it going to stall projects?
Just with respect to water, the way I see it is that we want to expand water supply regardless, like even the existing OCP, and so in that respect there, in my mind, the water initiatives continue and move forward in that respect in the creation of that additional supply separate from the OCP itself, because the OCP, I wouldn't say it's fine-tuning, but unless the OCP was to go to status quo, no development at all, the reality is we got to do something to move the water side forward. The economic development in there and the branding in there and the OCP side, yeah, they're all integrated. One of the things we got to be careful about or cognizant of is as much as we hire consultants for this, there is still staff time involved in that and overseeing and attending meetings and those sorts of things, so that's something in terms of the staff capacity. The time frame, just a couple things. First off, the old OCP is not 12 years old, it's only 10 and a half years, but it did take 19 months from the time of the first meeting to the time of final approval, 19 months in there. There was some lead time, consultant retention, et cetera, that was playing as part of it. But having said that, one of the reasons why that one was so long was because the approach was as much as we had an RDN OCP, this was the first landfill OCP. Yeah. So the time is taken a great deal of it. Yeah, that's the way it was viewed. We didn't take the RDN document and say, how should it change? We created a whole new document. I don't see this as necessarily being to that level of depth. There's going to be some parts that somebody looks at and say, that's good, it still applies, despite the fact we're later. So time frame wise, in my mind, kind of set a schedule, but if the end date moves around a little bit to do it right, that's okay. And that public engagement part is huge, and so you mentioned summers and that. The one part is engaging in the public, the other part is also the individuals involved in the OCP review run into in some cases, meeting fatigue in them. So being aware of that is a bit of a concern as well. The outside interests, the aspect of VIU in that, the little episode where they just looked at the village core side of things was interesting, to say the least, in terms of it. And the presentations that they made later in the week showed a lot of energy in that respect. So it's something we can facilitate even better. Councillor Copeland?
I'm just going to say, as has been stated, there are components of each OCP, the economic development, the branding, the village core, that really feed into each other. So running them in parallel, I think there's benefits to doing that. I still would see, particularly if you looked at the OCP, economic development, branding, there would essentially be 3 work plans. But what you'd be doing is laying them out and looking at the milestones where you would combine them when you came to a public information meeting, where you could say, over in this corner we've got economic development, we've got branding, we've got whatever over here. So there's savings in that regard, plus I think it might help avoid some fatigue.
Who's left? It's one of the, oh, Mr. McRae.
Yeah, Your Worship, just as speaking to the motion, if the council wishes to proceed, it's just my understanding that we would need an early release in funds at that point. The budget won't be approved till May, and if the council wishes to have us move in April, we would need early release, and the motion would have to be amended to have that piece on there.
Okay. Councillor Coulson?
So what is the surplus number? You mentioned it, you got it before the meeting and we get a schedule, but what is the number?
Sorry, Your Worship, my comment is that did we have the 100,000 that we needed to put forward for the OCP? That's all I asked. I didn't give a final number for the surplus.
Okay.
Recognizing this is a committee meeting, when it comes to it, could the early release motion just be part of the regular council meeting?
I believe so, Your Worship, yes. Just a comment to make everybody aware.
Okay. Councillor Haynes?
So part of that meeting, which won't be a budget meeting, if we can have that surplus continuity, that would be great. With all the other pieces that are coming out of surplus now too.
Okay, any further on the OCP? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
So I move that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council instruct staff to establish an operating reserve fund to fund the next official community plan review process after this one, contributing $15,000 a year beginning in 2018.
Okay, second by Councillor Neary. Discussion?
The point there is, over the next 2 years, we will complete the OCP review, but in 5 and usually 5 to 7 years after that, there's another one. And at that point, you're again looking at 100, maybe at that point, 125, 130, whatever $1,000. So because it's one of those large ticket items, especially for a municipality as small as Lansville, we should be thinking of it like any other major project that you want to pre-fund rather than having a major hit in 1 year in the budget.
Councillor Coulson?
No, 5 to 7 was the time. I was curious how you came up with 15, so, yeah.
Councillor Haynes?
I would support that on the condition that we can get council away from padding the budget so that there's not these outrageous surpluses from year to year, because then we're already building this stuff into the budget. Then we cannot have these amounts that seem to be available for whatever use every year.
Councillor Coulson?
Yeah, actually, on the surplus, I have a question on that, because we heard it, I think, our first committee of the whole meeting, that we're not actually allowed to plan to have a surplus, but we do when we don't budget diligently enough. So what kind of guides that process? Because you can be very loose in how you budget and end up with 20, 30, whatever number you want.
Yeah, I mean, simply within the budgeting process, to zero it out, normal practices, okay, well, we've got this extra, let's put it in the reserve. So in that respect there, nobody kind of knows what the outcome of the year itself is going to be.
No.
But in terms of meeting that legislation, they do it just by doing that.
Okay. Because certainly needs some margin of operating room, but I think going back to 2014, it was $250,000 or something that effect in surplus.
Yeah.
It's a substantial number.
But that's why staff this year in terms of budgeting, rather than, see, effectively what happens in a lot of cases is they take all the numbers and they say, well, we're not sure about all these numbers, so let's just add 10% to every number, at which point you get to the end of the year and there's this surplus. Staff's taken the approach of, okay, let's create contingency numbers so you can quantify the part where it's the safety factor, as opposed to building it into these unidentifiable spaces. Staff took, I don't know, was there 3, 1 in each fund, I think, in terms of it. So, and that's again part of the balancing factor that plays into it.
Yeah, because, sorry, I keep around, because the 15 grand that Bob mentioned could easily be backed out of quote unquote budgeting surplus based on how we currently do it. And so, net zero balance to residents directed to an OCP review, but we just have to tighten up our budgeting process.
When you say budgeting surplus, do you mean the number at the beginning of the year or the number that results at the end of the year? Because theoretically, at the beginning of the year, when
Yeah.
you look at it, there is no surplus.
Yeah, it's
At the end
when
of
I've looked at the
year-
SOFI reports and seen the surplus
Okay.
at the end of the year, but then also on our 5-year plan, going back to the previous year, it was surpluses already budgeted out for 5 years sometimes.
Yeah,
so.
which is a different approach with as director of finance. It's the zero and
Yeah.
approach as opposed to this is what we think we're going to have a surplus. Councillor Hain? After you did your,
I think that was me.
Oh,
okay. Councillor Hazelberg?
I like the biblical approach. During the 7 years of excess, you put it in the storehouse so that when the 7 years of famine follow, there's a storehouse surplus. Or the mouse who stored everything when his friends were all having a party. If it's there, there's always something that comes up that you need it for, rather than alarm, going to the community, raising taxes immediately because we've got to do something. Period.
Councillor Corcoran?
A bunch of it's been said, but I guess the other thing is it's like the analogy where you have a car and you think something might break, so you want to have $500 just in case. But if you have 10 cars, you don't have to put $500 in each one of them because it's not likely that all 10 of them are going to have the same thing. So it's just a matter of tightening things up.
Councillor
okay,
Hain?
just my last comment, Councillor Gesselberg. The problem is that, and I get the whole famine and having money set aside, but the problem is when you over set aside. 15,000 is equivalent to a 1% tax increase. So what we're saying is our surplus isn't enough. We're going to take another 15,000 and add it to the budget and add 1%. It gets to the point where we're now telling residents we're going to take your money because we're better at managing it than you are. Because when an issue comes up and we need to raise taxes, we don't want to go to you because we don't think you want to pay then. So we're going to take it now. And to me, I have a real philosophical problem with saying I'm better at managing your money than you are, so give it to me ahead of time for something I don't know what it is yet. And that's what's happened when you've got a $280,000 surplus going forward every year. We're saying to them, we can manage your money better than you can, so we want it now. That's not right.
Now, keep in mind that the motion itself did
Yeah.
not identify that the 15,000 is to come out of the tax increase, just 15,000 set
Okay,
aside.
well, where yet?
It's up to that process, though, as to what the tax increase was. Just comment to what Councillor Gesselberg said. We could be like other more major governments where what they do is in years of peace, they spend like crazy, and in years of famine, they borrow.
Borrow like crazy.
Councillor Neer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm willing to support this, but what's just struck me, because you don't always think about it, you get kind of on the bandwagon. It sounds like a great idea, but in 2018, there could be a whole different complexion of council sitting at this table, in which case, some direction has been given, but it's not set in concrete. It is simply a suggestion from this council that we think this is if we support it, that we think this is a pretty good idea. But it doesn't confer any obligation on a future council to support it and carry through.
Skeptic.
None of this stuff does.
Well, I'd say realist rather than skeptic, to be honest. But
I think it's more a statement of intent.
yes,
than anything else,
absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
gets it on the radar. So
But I think we need to recognise that it really doesn't have a great deal of weight,
Yeah.
except as a suggestion, a statement of intent.
I believe the 15 starts to be set aside in 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So barring any resignations, it would still be the same group. But
Hope springs eternal.
there you go. It happens.
That's true, yeah.
Well,
And,
just that, exactly what you just said there. And at this point, it's a place marker. And when we get down to the nitty gritty, we might say, you know what, 2018, we can't do that because of some other problem. But at least there's a place marker there. At that point, in 2017, we might not be thinking about when is the next OCP. So put it in there when you think of it and change it.
in terms of the future, one of the things that we went between 10 and 12 years in doing this OCP or considering this OCP review. And it got put off for a variety of reasons, such as lack of water, we really need it, people are happy with what's there, etc. The worst thing I can see happening is somebody embarks on an OCP review just because we have the money, because that certainly happens in some cases. Or alternatively, they identify that they're only going to do a limited review, and they continue to build that reserve up. So in the future, at some point, somebody hopefully would put some sort of a cap on it, recognizing that what a comprehensive one versus a less comprehensive one.
You're still young, Colin.
You know something needs to be said here? Maybe not so much. Okay, anything further? All those in favor of the second motion? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, Freedom Municipality Honor Policy. Staff prepared a report detailing out potential policy with respect to awarding freemen of the municipality side of things. Looking at some aspects of what other municipalities have done in creating this policy.
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Hames, seconded by Councillor Neary. Discussion. I only had one thing that was just within the policy. When it's talking about the criteria, page 17, this one actually, it's in the eligibility section, and it's just a personal thing. Page 17? Page 7 of the agenda.
Okay. No, page 7.
Page 17.
And the third bullet of nominees for selection, they include residents who have achieved success, recognition, or celebrity in their chosen field of talent, whether they have gained national or international acclaim, and as a result brought recognition to Lanceville. I look at some of the people that get awarded, like the Order of BC and the Order of Canada, and that, and it's somebody that went out and became an actor and they became famous. I struggle with that one because, you know, it's separate from the fact that you have a ton of money doing it, but separate from that, how does it serve the Lanceville residents is what I struggle with. The first couple, you know, a standing commitment or service to, long-term distinguished service to the community, I get those ones. The other one, you know, you put up the sign that says home of. Next time I struggle with that one. But Councillor Giselman?
You want to invite Diana Kroll to move to Lanceville?
Well, the news already had him kind of along with, what's his name, Mr. Castell. And the Nano's already laying claim to this square plaza. So, no.
So actually, I did have something serious, well, fairly serious, as much as I can. Page 12. The bling that we're going to be giving to this person. I'm wondering where the lifetime parking is going to be. Do we have our own buses to give them a recreation pass? Medlar gift, fine. Inscription in a window of the district office.
Now, keep in mind that was the original report in November.
Oh.
Now we're going to be giving them some coupons for Oh, we don't have one of those.
I see. Slap my hand.
There it is.
Okay.
Page 9.
All right. You've gotten more realistic.
Well, you took a shot at my celebrity. That's not fair.
2 beers at the hotel.
Yeah. I guess one of my questions would be, is there any reason to not do this? Or not to establish a policy? Theoretically, we could still do it under a community charter without a policy. That's fine. Okay, Councillor.
I think now is the time to do it. Rather than waiting until you're thinking of somebody and then trying to put something together. We've been through that with other things, so
Yeah.
you don't have to.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree because, you know, having as staff to do the work and produce a draft policy, it would seem somewhat churlish to say, oh, we've changed our minds, we don't want one. I mean, the whole point was to you know, bring some kind of structure to a procedure that we felt that might be valid thing to have. So on that basis, I would support it. I think I kind of agree with you about, you know, putting Lanceville on the map. it would not necessarily have to be, you know, a celebrity in the entertainment field. It could be somebody with, you know, scientific merit or something. I'm not sure about that, but the fact is that the person has to be nominated and then unanimously approved by council before you get to that point. So, you know, that's what the procedure is for.
Councillor Folsom and Councillor Hank.
No, I like it. Let's get done. I do agree with your comments because to me, just because someone has achieved fame in their chosen craft, no, really, though, to give them the. Go in Ontario, every little hockey town has the name of the hockey players who've made it big.
Well, hockey's different.
That's one thing, though, right? But to give them the freedom of the municipality, to me, it potentially undermines the magnitude of that honor to those who have dedicated their life, you know, efforts of volunteerism to the community. So to me, the effort needs to be focused more on in the community, time served, that type of thing, rather than. Anyways, I'll stop picking on Diana Crow.
How many times they told people to pick them up?
Councillor Hank and Councillor Swain.
The reason I like it is, you know, landfills are small fish in a shoal and in a federal pond. For us to get any opportunity to recognize a resident for any type of award seems to be almost impossible. To this date, it's been impossible. So this is a way that we can finally recognize those residents who have contributed a lot to the community. We're not waiting on another level of government to help us to get some recognition out there for a person. So I think this is a nice way to do it. You know, it makes it hopefully so that residents will feel more inclined to want to step up because they see that council and their local government appreciates it. So, you know, I think it's a good step to move forward and to recognize volunteerism, which is a dying industry right now. So I think it's a good idea to move it forward. And do you need a motion to take out the word celebrity?
Well, you've got a motion on the floor recommending adoption. You could add at the end of it, as amended, striking.
Actually, let me clarify my comment.
Okay.
It's a personal thing that bothers me,
Yeah.
but there may be some future council that there's some specific circumstances that make it of value to the community. So it does say may include, so therefore I leave that to a future council to exercise that right diligently. As opposed to having to vote to waive the policy, which to me is more dangerous. Then it becomes a free-for-all.
Well, it's unanimous anyway.
Councillor Swain?
Yeah, I was just going to say, some people just use their fame to do great things for their community.
Yeah.
You look at the Sedines and Canuck Place, and you know, those would be people that are worthy of maybe something like this and all the great work they do. So I think we have to remind ourselves people with fame aren't just, you know, driving big pimped out cars and loading. You know, they do, some do give back to their communities big time. So. And if someone were to do that in Lansville, maybe they are already, you know, a recipient of this award or honor.
Any further discussion? Councillor Cole?
Last comment. When you look at success recognition or celebrity, that could be a research scientist at Pacific Biological Station.
And that's, yeah, and I focused in on when it comes to the celebrity aspect, things in terms of performance excellence. Any further? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Grant aid policy, there were some concerns raised at previous committee of the whole, I believe, with respect to council meeting. With respect to our current grants and aid policy, some examples have been provided. Do note on page 23 of your agenda, there's some notes from our November 2nd committee of the whole meeting. That were some comments and concerns that were raised with respect to the policy. So what would council like to do? Okay, I'll start off. One of the concerns revolved around things becoming more of an operational funding aspect, where organizations on a regular basis or becoming more generic. This helps us run our program type of reasoning. Has been one aspect of it. A couple things I noted in going through the other policies. First of all, I'm not sure if we copied them or they copied us, but boy, Ladysmith sure is ours. exactly. But there's a couple, North Cowichan specifically mentions that you must prove how it benefits the residents. Parksville, majority of the members of the group or organization must reside in the municipality, so there's those aspects to it as well. But ours kind of implies it. Whether or not it proves it is another matter. So we're going to do. Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I picked up on some common themes in the different examples given. Volunteerism and citizen involvement was one that I think that we don't emphasise. But I personally, as a councillor making these kind of decisions, however small the fund is that we grant, we're a small community, I think it's important to understand how these organisations are staffed. And broad accessibility to a large portion of the community. However, and I like that idea, however, often non-profits, by their nature, provide a very specific service or a very specific program or event that's events often are targeted at a broad spectrum. Services are often targeted at a narrower section of the community, whether it's youth, seniors, children, people with disabilities, and so on and so forth. So I don't know how you interpret that, and yet it does appeal to me. I agree with the Mayor's previous comment. I think it's really important for those questions to be answered. On the City of Duncan grant and aid application form, granted, Duncan's a bigger community, but the questions are very specific about how does the proposed programme activity promote, and it gives a list of the areas that are of interest to council in terms of community service. How does it benefit the citizens? The usual detailed programme and event budget. I liked the idea of asking how many volunteers are presently in the organisation, and specifically for Lantston, because I know that one of the organisations that has received in the past grants and aid is not actually based in Lantsville, it's based elsewhere, but it delivers its programmes in Lantsville. So I think, in the past year, how many persons has your organisation served in Lantsville? I think those are important questions to be asked. I have loads of points made. Does council want to go with categories, themes specifically? One of these examples is specify beneficiary groups must be seniors or youth. Is it feasible? Is it reasonable to specify in a small community like ours specific groups? But I do believe that we need to specify community of Lantsville. How does it serve specifically that community? How many people are do you serve? And it gives an idea then of value for money, more than anything. And I'm still reluctant to fund through grants and aid ongoing programming. I like either single initiatives, seed money, startup money, or maybe a program. I like the idea of singular events or a singular program that is, we're going to put this on this year specifically for this purpose, this group. But for an ongoing program that provides year on year, I'm not very comfortable with that. When there might be other groups that are standing in the sidelines.
Councillor Heaton.
Yeah, when you look at the policy, it says our primary purpose is to provide assistance for specific projects or events that benefit the residents, and yet I don't think we carry through with that when we approve our grants. And what happens is we only get so many applicants every year, which tend to be the same people over and over, that now what's happening is they're just becoming core funding for certain individuals. So I think, we have to decide if we're going to follow our primary purpose, and that's what's going to be the basis of the grant, or if we're going to continue just giving it because they're the only ones that apply. And we budgeted $2,500, and they're lower than the $2,500 mark. I think maybe we have to decide, is it more about meeting the criteria or just giving out the money? And if it's just about giving out the money, well, then we're good as we are. But if it is really to set the goal, then maybe we have to just say that we're not going to give out any money this year. Maybe in the policy we should have that if you haven't changed your specific project at all, it's the same thing over and over, then, sort of we can't provide funding this year. Try and come up with something new. I just think that otherwise we're not really even meeting our own primary goals or purpose. So, and that's been always my issue, is that it's just, now it's becoming core funding for a couple of organizations that are the only ones that are applying pretty much, which I don't think is the intent of the granting aid program. I know like the RDN and other organizations, they either made them the core funding, like NOLT, or they don't get it the second time around. So I'd like us to change our criteria that says if you're applying for the same project again, then you got to take a pass for a couple of years or something.
Councillor Coulson.
Yeah, good points. I missed the November meeting when we kicked this around, but this is almost a mirror discussion like we had a year ago on the same topic. So I totally agree. I think just tighten up our language about what truly we want with this. I'll put a plug in for Duncan. Their guidelines page 24. I love it. It's one page for their and they must have the programs, activities, or events, but they must not have. Preference may be given to application that. It's an easy read. It's a quick read. If we insert that kind of thing into our opening page, our policy as it stands now, it's good. Clarify some of the language. Done.
Councillor Coulson.
Do we have a motion right now on the floor?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that staff be directed to update and amend the grants and aid policy as per the comments from the November 2nd meeting, comments from this meeting. And I guess I'll start to say the motion, but I'll add that in the meantime, members of Council can provide staff. This is I should stop.
So does that include the Duncan guidelines?
Okay.
So, I'll back up.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Move that Committee of the Whole.
Sorry, just at this point, you could just be an instruction to staff, because we're still in the process of developing something for you.
Okay.
So you can just give instruction to staff to bring back a draft.
Yeah.
That was my intent.
Because the state Committee of the Whole.
I'll second that. His intent.
Yeah.
We just thought we saved the page motion, so that's okay.
Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Haney. Discussion. Councillor Coulson.
Well, there's been some very good discussion here. Like they say on page 23 is the list of comments from the November 2nd meeting. I think those are all applicable, plus the comments now, and just suggest to Council if you have any other comments to send them to staff to incorporate into the draft.
Okay. My only question to you, Councillor Coulson, is you made reference to page 23. Is your intent for them to incorporate everything that's in like items 1 to 11, if it's not already, which some technically I think is already are, incorporate all of those?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so then it becomes a bit of a shooting match for staff to kind of go, okay, well, which ones do we put in Adam? Well, let's roll with this. And I'm okay with that. Sorry. You're welcome.
Well, I think part of it was that there have been a lot of councillors here have notes that they've made and marked up the copies of the examples, and that information could be provided to staff. They're going to collate it and come up with their best shot at the draft.
As long as we don't shoot staff for the shot. Yeah. Mr. McRae?
Sorry, Councillor O'Hara's question.
Councillor Mary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Craig. If you look at the list of items 1 to 11 on page 23, there's a lot of duplication there. Some of those comments mean basically the same thing. I think it reflects most of what I've heard around this table this evening. I'm willing to just give that motion to staff and look at the draft when it comes. If we need to amend it or we feel strongly that there's been some misinterpretation, we can do that then. But I don't think we need to be very prescriptive about what should or should not be in it. I think I'm confident staff have got the gist of what council wants.
Okay, Mr. McRae, then Councillor Colson.
Mr. Worship. Given the comments again from November, I think Councillor Mary summed it up. We have a general flavor from the Duncan document as suggested by Councillor Wilson to the pages that have been suggested. There's general themes that have been identified, and I think staff have a good idea of what council wishes to see with their next document.
Councillor Colson.
So, thanks. I had two questions that I put forward for comment to focus the direction. The Duncan document spoke to be sponsored by a local not-for-profit organization. Do we want to limit it to that extent? Personally, I don't see the need to. If there's a worthy, any organization that's putting on a one-time event, sure, as long as there's some direct benefit to the community. Is it a legal requirement?
Excuse me? I thought the emphasis was on local.
Local not-for-profit.
Yeah, not-for-profit.
Does it specifically have to be awarded to a not-for-profit?
It has to specifically be
Okay.
awarded
Or
not-for-profit.
the umbrella of
Yes.
sponsoring them.
Okay, all right. So
I'm
we'll keep
sorry,
the
I thought you
sponsor.
were making the distinction that there says local versus like it's the Cancer Campaign of BC doing an event here in the community. So that's still a not-for-profit, but it's not a local based group. So
Okay.
using the word local may have connotations that I'm not sure appeal.
Yeah.
So it's just that it's not for profit.
Okay. And the second thing I was going to ask, Denise mentioned it, awarding all the money or not. Do we want to have some guidance on that? So,
I think it's kind of discretion each time, depending on it's almost like you go searching for applicants.
should we have language though in the updated policy to reflect that, so that future councils aren't having the same debate on intent?
Probably not. I was sorry.
Yes.
Probably not. I was.
So, what were you
Which-
suggesting?
Well, just, do we have a comment there, monies may not be necessarily awarded every year?
I agree.
Just kind of warning.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so people don't go, well, I'm the only one that applied, why didn't I get
I
it?
get it all.
Exactly.
Right. I see what you mean.
Okay. Councillor Swing.
Yeah, just general comment. I think the Duncan guidelines are great. Just to reiterate from our last time we talked about this, the one thing I really like about it is it does address the recreational needs of maybe people in the community and maybe attending different competitions abroad and helping offset those costs. So instead of just always limiting it to some group, it could also just go to individuals or groups that are traveling abroad to compete in science competitions or sport.
Sorry,
Yeah.
but don't they have to be part of a nonprofit in order to be, so they,
So fall, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess since attending the Nanaimo Park and Rec Commission meetings, the way they do it in Nanaimo, and maybe this is something we can model, is they do award grant monies to sports groups. And this could be just like, hey, we're heading over to Vancouver to play
Yeah.
and give a lacrosse team some money to help offset their travel costs. So maybe it's something we should consider. I don't know. They seem to do it successfully in Nanaimo.
So that would have to fall under, that would have to fall under a different kind of funding stream then, if it can't be a grants and aid then, right?
I think it still falls under grants and aid, but I'd have to double check. I can't say 100% for sure. But they do give grant money to sports teams for traveling and various things. So. And I did mention this in the last time we had this discussion.
Mr. McRae.
Just having a quick discussion on something like the soccer association would fall as a nonprofit, so we do believe that something like that would qualify as long as they are in standing. So,
Yeah, I have seen cases though where it's become a discussion, for example, if there's an umbrella organization, but then there's a team under that umbrella organization, if you try to fund directly the team, you run into an issue because the team itself is an organization and they're part of it, and then the organization goes, wait a minute, you gotta pay it to us, and then who knows if it makes it to the team certain aspect. So I have seen that come into not-for-profits. Okay. Any further on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Water Task Force terms of reference.
Move the recommendation?
As presented
Yep.
by Councillor Haynes. Seconded?
Points for your worship. I was surprised to see this on here since the January the 11th motion was actually defeated on January the 25th. So there isn't actually a direction on the books when council reconsidered the motion for the work on the well.
This wasn't defeated.
That was my understanding, that the original motion from January the 11th came back for reconsideration on January the 26th, and by virtue of reconsideration was defeated and superseded by the original motion, which was amended and then adopted by council. And I don't object to the discussion around this, but I was just surprised that this has
Just the wells rehabilitation came back.
Just question to staff. There was a motion with respect to the well 6 versus the well whatever, and that's the one that came back for reconsideration. Is there a separate motion related to the task force?
I think it ties more to the,
if you read the minutes from the meeting, was defeated, and the task force, the well motion was considered in its place. That's my understanding. If I'm incorrect, that's fine.
Any answer from questions from
Yes,
staff on that?
Just a reference to that, Your Worship, it's clear there was a bit of confusion during that whole period, so if council wishes to perhaps defer the discussion until the next available council meeting.
But that's the way of council, I guess.
Your worship,
Comment?
Always go back to the
The question was,
well, I know exactly what
yeah, the
happened.
motion on the floor though was to do well 6.
Yeah.
It wasn't to create the task force.
But the motion was that council refers the motion to,
The motion itself was the do well 6 is what I would call. Councillor Gisworth.
My 2 cents. I'm going back to the minutes. Going back to the
just unplug.
maybe we should wait. Going back to the agenda for the January 25th meeting, which then was that the council approves the January 11th minutes. So what happened is that on January 11th, the first motion was to replace well number 6. Councillor Haim then made an amending motion that council refers the motion on the floor to a groundwater task force to be established by council. And you recall there was quite a bit of debate. What I think happened is that as we were leaving the meeting, Trudy, because I had actually typed out the wording for that, asked me for the wording, and I handed it to her, which is the wording that appears at the top of page 6 of that agenda, that when it says that council directs staff to create draft terms of reference for a groundwater task force for consideration by the council. I don't think that there was a separate motion during the meeting for that, but what happened is when I handed her the second set of wordings that she created that I may be wrong, we may have actually had that. But there was two things. There was the main motion, well 6, with an amendment. It was actually an amendment to refer it to a task force.
But that was that part, but I was pretty sure there was a motion to create a water task force.
Yeah, there was.
Yes.
But the amending motion
Had to do with
refers the
well-
motion on the floor to a groundwater task force.
That was well said, so.
Okay, so do you think there was a separate motion to create terms of
But this
reference?
is, okay.
And that's what we're dealing with today.
Yes.
All right.
It's the 11th.
Yeah, so on the
So
11th,
those
this
are
is,
minutes for January 25th. It's what
Okay.
happened at the meeting on the 25th.
right, but
not
just
what
so
was
you
on the
can see
agenda.
here, this was a motion specific to the task force.
Yes.
It wasn't wells plus task force. There was the motion where we referred a well
To a task
rehabilitation
force.
to a task force, but that wasn't, this was a separate motion here.
Goes to-
Well, needless to say, I make that motion that we do that tonight.
C16-16-1.
It's there.
It's there,
Part
so
of the
let's,
record.
yeah.
The record doesn't lie.
And the separate one would
Pardon me? No, the minutes are in here.
So, pursuant to,
be, okay, I'm just trying to find the second motion.
to reconsider and vote again on a matter that was the subject of a vote, the motion to refer to a task force that passed on January the 11th.
So that unfolded right, because that decision, it was going to be referred to a task force, which was created through a separate motion, or at least a report about it. So that motion came
Here's the
back.
L6 motion, okay? This says be referred to groundwater task force, and there's a separate motion about the groundwater task force. So
Oh,
one-
yeah, I can bring it up. I put the timestamps on some of these things. Like that.
Oh, yeah, Brad.
But it guys, the task force died with it.
No, it didn't.
No.
It was a separate
There was
motion.
two separate motions.
Yes.
One was the well 6 motion. That was the one that ended up being reconsidered and maybe defeated. And then there's this one here, which is separate motion of the groundwater task force. So this motion got retained. That one got retained. This one was the one that being considered. These are the actual minutes, so this was
The
that.
11th.
Yeah. So this one ended up on the January meeting for reconsideration.
I thought the same thing.
You thought what?
So I move
That
staff
was-
recommendation.
Okay, Mr. McRae?
So we do have C16-2, if that's what we're referring to, that Councillor Hain moved and seconded by Councillor Gesselbrecht, the council direct staff to create a draft terms of reference for groundwater task force consideration by council, including composition, in brackets, out brackets, timing and purpose, in brackets, out brackets.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
16-1 or 2?
-2.
I got
There's a-
16-1.
There's a typo in the minutes. There's two
Oh, is there?
16-1
Okay.
motions.
Thank you. We're good. So yes, staff did as directed. Good job. Okay. All right, Councillor Hain moved the recommendation. There's a seconder. Councillor Colson. Okay, discussion. Councillor Hain.
I see this as a good thing. I see this as a way to move the water issue forward faster, because we still have to work through the issues and be able to find out, even within the community, what neighborhoods even want water. You know, we don't know what neighborhoods are willing to pay for water. So this is going to help speed up this process about how we're going to get water throughout the community to the existing residents. You know, so even right now, we have a water agreement that says it goes to the winds. Well, I can bet you dollars to donuts, we don't even know if they want water up in the winds yet. So we could spend all this time and effort thinking they do, and then we get to the end result and they don't. You know, so I just see this as a process to help move this issue along faster, because they can start dealing with the various groups in the community, getting feedback.
Councillor Colson.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good thing if constructed right. So my first comment will be on that. The composition, I would suggest that the committee also composes, a representative from Coors, possibly a hydrologist, whatever expert advice is needed to make things, move along at the time of the meeting, rather than just having this be some, body on the wings of the process. Have them immersed in moving this along. I think it'll be a good thing. Some peer review happening. Can I also add some suggestions for the scope, the objectives? I like what staff has put forward here as a first crack. Additional thoughts, I thought, for objectives. The committee would also provide support and assistance in specifically identifying water needs and requirements to unserviced areas. So that would address some of Councilor Hayes' comments. They could help canvass, conduct surveys, what have you, to truly identify the needs and requirements to the unserviced areas. The second point that was mentioned on page 47 about providing recommendations on options to expand the water system capacity to accommodate the entire water service area within the district. I might be overreading in that, but I would hate to limit it just to that specific task. To me, they would be providing recommendations on options to expand the water system capacity, period. That could include incremental capacity increases all the way up to accommodation of the entire water service area. The third thing I'd suggest is some language providing support and assistance in preparing cost-benefit analysis for all identified projects and opportunities. That's it.
Councilor Gisbert.
Yeah, I like the way this recommendation. Task force, I think some of us have a problem with that. It sounds like the Marines landing at Tripoli or something. A little more innocuous name like Water Advisory Committee. I've seen that. I mean, what's in a name? Water Advisory Committee. We can have members of the WAC.
And the organization at the end of it.
I think the objectives are good. I would just point out that Councilman Colson's he pointed out he'd like to have somebody from Coors or a hydrologist on. I think that is handled by item number 7, advisory persons to the committee. Item D, where any other staff or consultants as designated by the CAO. I've got a lot of confidence in our CAO, and I think if he felt that bringing in some hired guns to adjudicate on an issue or to help out, he would certainly do it. So I would leave it in his hands. And otherwise, I think these recommendations, if we're going to do it now, okay. This is, once again, we're all acting in conjunction, OCP, branding, whatever, heading down that tunnel to get this all done for the community. So let's do it.
Councilor Mary.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I kind of heard some answers to the questions I had. I see composition of the committee and then advisory persons to the committee. I think it needs to be made quite clear what the voting capacity of the committee is rather than composition. In my view, composition of the committee should include some kind of some representation from staff, be it the CAO and or the Director of Public Works. And voting rights can be made very clear that, only these members will have that voting right, which is probably members of council and community at large. I have a question to staff, and I'm wondering, under the composition of the committee number 5, 3 community at large members who are residents of the district and have expertise, interest or knowledge. I know it says or, but why would we specify expertise? Because the whole point of advisory persons to the committee is that you would bring that expertise in to advise the committee. Because saying that, it's not saying it's a requirement that they have expertise, but it says that they will have expertise, interest or knowledge. There's a tendency to load, I think, a committee with people with expertise if we're not careful. And they will not necessarily represent, Joe Blocks, who is just interested in getting water supply to his particular section of the community. So it's a question rather than, criticism. I'm just wondering.
Sure. Through your worship, yeah. staff struggled a bit with figuring out what composition should be involved with this process. We're trying to take into account council's comments. Some of the comments we heard about other committees, et cetera, ranged into talking about what are you looking for? What is your base understanding? Not I want to, not to be glib, but I want to be on the water committee because I like water. Well, what is your specific interest? Do you have some expertise? It doesn't mean it has to be the be all end all, because as you noticed on the application form, there's no graded criteria. You're not going to get a 1 for a PN, a 2 for this. This is what the value that they can bring to the table. There may be a resident that simply has been living in Lansville forever and a day and has watched how water has changed in the community, and that may be a benefit to council in wishing to vet that out. So it leaves a bit of openness, but also makes some demands on people applying for the committee to provide us with what their involvement is with water has been.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that. I am still really leery of a water advisory committee, specifically just for water. I would prefer, and this is a suggestion being thrown out for consideration since this is committee of the whole of the discussion, I would actually prefer to see a general planning advisory committee that is an umbrella group for all of these kind of planning questions. Questions around water security, questions around helping drive the OCP review and the contents of the OCP. There are so many elements that all factor into planning within this community. I think I would like to see a planning advisory committee set up in this community. However, I'm kind of reluctant to suggest 2. A water and a planning committee, because I'm not sure that we have the capacity to support 2 committees. I think it would be onerous for staff to be involved in and around 2 extra committees, but I do think we need 1. And my suggestion would be that council really gives serious consideration to the idea of putting in place a planning advisory committee that looks at all of these issues, can have issues referred to it for its consideration and recommendations to council. I would suggest that the scope of work for such a committee would take it a good few years down the road. We've got an OCP review coming up. We're talking about an economic development plan. We're talking about a water master plan. We know that there is development or developers standing in the wings. There's already a major development plan before our planners, application for our planners. So I think the time is right for us to address this, but instead of being so specific and prescriptive with a water advisory committee, I would like to see a general planning advisory committee that is an umbrella group for all those planning questions.
Councillor Cook.
I read through this, and I come not supporting the recommendation. Some of the reasons that Councillor Neary's just mentioned. I guess when I read through this, I thought we were putting the cart before the horse. When I was thinking of just water, I was thinking that the process would be to develop a terms of reference for a water master plan, one of the components of which would be an advisory committee to that process. So I thought we were putting the cart before the horse. But I do like Councillor Neary's suggestion here. Well, backing up one step, looking back on our earlier conversation about the OCP, etc. I mean, there should be. I'm assuming there will be an advisory committee with that as well. And in both these cases, I'm not talking about a technical committee, because the technical people are separate and they support the committee and provide information to the committee. So, having said that, I like Councillor Neary's idea of a planning committee. Often a planning committee is land use planning, but I think in Little Lanceville's case, it could be planning of whatever, including water, servicing, etc. I think that it would then be, it could be 2 council and 1 staff. There's usually a staff person that sort of is the person that's guiding everybody or looking after all the nuts and bolts. Those 3 people wouldn't have a vote. I would see there being a larger contingent of the public involved, and look at having people from various areas of the community as well as people with various interests. So maybe it ends up being, 8, there's 5 residents, 2 council and 1 staff, and it's a broader planning committee. It would be advising council on the OCP, which now we talked earlier about including in the OCP review, looking at water, who gets water, who needs water, where it might go. So I think it could be brought into one process with one bigger advisory committee.
Councillor Hain.
Yeah, I can't support that. I think, one, we're getting way too cumbersome. It's getting too much going on at the same time. We have too many balls being juggled at once. But first off, what message are we sending to the residents to say, we're going to create an OCP to review the OCP, but we're going to start this planning committee over here who's going to move forward on development and moving the community forward? That is a mixed message to me. To me, it would say, I don't really care what you say here because I got this group that's going to be working on planning initiatives. I thought when we started this, we had said water was our #1 priority. We wanted to focus on water and find ways to look at moving water to those areas in the community that need it and to deal with those initiatives. And now it seems like we're getting off in all these different tangents at the same time that, we've got too many things boiling on the stove at the same time. I think it's going to get confusing. We're going to get bogged down. I think people are going to read way different things into this than what it was intended. I believe in the keep it simple because then people can understand it. They can see what our goal is. It's what we always said it was. It was our #1 strategic priority back from 2007. Deal with water and get it to the residents. We have an OCP that speaks to that right now. Let's first find out what the residents feel about how they want their community to move before we start planning it, while they're even discussing it themselves. I just think it sends a horrible message to the residents.
Councillor Swain.
Yeah, so just with this whole water task force, from what I heard, it came about because basically council didn't want to get bogged down with the technical details of doing such a task. So it's going to be put on to members of the community. So with that being said, I do have some issues with that, and I think with having people advising on such a technical thing from an engineering and planning standpoint, including the hydrogeology, I think we need to really look at the individual members of this committee. #1, I think we need to look at the bias that some of these committee members may have. The second thing would be the liability of these committee members. And the third thing would be the vetting of credentials. So actually seeing if they actually have an insurance or if they have licenses to warrant their expert opinions on guiding council in their decisions on water.
Okay. Just because we've gone around once. When the idea of the task force came up, there appeared to be, in my view, a bit of a difference of tack as to what this was meant to address. From my standpoint, it wasn't meant to address necessarily technical issues specifically, so the aspect of credentials and that sort of thing is less of a concern for me because we've got a variety of policy-related items revolving around water that are not technical in nature. So, for example, the point was made earlier, kind of working to survey and consider who wants water, who needs water, that sort of thing. That in itself is not a technical thing per se in terms of pipes and wells and that sort of an aspect. We've got policies like water supply and connection policies. So when on the technical basis we achieve water supply, let's say, kind of what direction should we take on who gets it, recognizing that we don't have unlimited water supply, so it's going to need input on policy there, which again goes back to the kind of who needs it aspect of things, the priority aspect of things. The membership of the task force as proposed in my mind is too narrow. The fact that if somebody has expertise, that's good. separately, if somebody has interest, that in itself is good. But we've got, people that are on the existing system. They're part of this discussion as well, because when we start talking about changing standards or proposing to change standards, that has an impact on potentially on existing users. We've got people that aren't on the system, some that want water, some that don't. We've got development-driven individuals or organizations that are looking for water supply. We've got, flip side, development-wary individuals who are going to have a desire to be heard. And within this model, there doesn't appear to be an allowance for that type of input in that respect. The Village Core Committee itself, planning basically 2 blocks of the district, was 9 members. And Bob, you were part of that. Did it function relatively well in terms of the organization, the meetings, and people being heard?
Well, actually,
Not saying
I wasn't formally part of that, but I did attend, and it was well done. It was a good process.
Yeah. So, in terms of the number of people is more limiting. But the aspect of the planning advisory, and a lot of communities have planning advisory committees. If we had an existing OCP that we were implementing, then certainly the stick handling of that, in my mind, can work through a planning advisory committee. When we come out the other end of the OCP, I could fully see the people that are on that OCP committee, a number of them wanting to continue to stick handle it and forming that planning advisory committee. Same thing with this, and the aspect of once the task or role of this is done and we're moving ahead with water and we've got the plan, and as a council we've received the advice and guidance of an advisory committee, then I could see that melding into that idea of a planning advisory, a broader based committee. But I think the aspect of trying to move ahead and establish these policies in a timely fashion and surveying the residents of the individual areas and their effect, I view that Water Advisory Committee, if we want to call it that, as being helping to facilitate that, similar to what the Village Core Group did and that sort of thing. So pulling it together for council as opposed to the 7 of us sitting here doing it. So it's not a technical thing in the same sense of like our previous discussion about wells, but I certainly help to see it facilitating the policy development. Councillor Copeland and Councillor Gizzo.
I think there's some confusion, and I won't speak for Councillor Mary, but I wasn't talking about having 2 committees and it getting too many balls and being too confusing. And maybe planning advisory committee is the wrong term, because there is typically something called a planning advisory committee. It's a little bit different. What I was picking up on and suggesting was that we have one broader committee, similar to what you spoke about, that's not a technical committee, but that it advises council on things like the public consultation process, the policies, those sort of things. But what they do is they advise us on the OCP process, but at the same time they also included with that is the water policies and the water, who gets water, who wants water. I agree with Councillor Coulson here. We shouldn't just be looking at the water local service area. We should erase the lines to start off and start fresh and see where that ends up. So it's really a more singular, streamlined process that's all inclusive. When we're talking about the OCP review and we're looking at property that may get developed or may have zoning changes or other things, then we should be really thinking about the servicing at the same time. So why not have one advisory committee, whatever we want to call it, that includes a broader range of members of the public, that's supported by staff and consultants where necessary, that advises council on the planning, be it land use, water, whatever.
So through your worship to staff, with the money now we're setting aside for OCP review, is it the intention that staff is going to come back to us here in the not too distant future with a report on how to move ahead with the OCP process? And would some of these suggestions be part of that report that's coming back?
I think the quick answer would be yes, because we still have to work out the terms of reference, and really and truly the terms of reference would dictate, what the timing.
So with that, a lot of good issues here tonight. But what I think we might want to do is just postpone discussion on this particular report, let these ideas germinate a little bit more, and also, staff's been listening to us here tonight, is that maybe we can get something back from them, or even an interim report saying, yeah, these are good ideas, these would be part of an OCP. So I suggest, I'm going to make a motion, I suggest we sort of postpone this to a future meeting, and let's think about it some more, because there's a lot of good elements here. And rather than saying we got to cut this one or throw them all together, let's just think about it.
Okay, so is that a formal motion to refer this to the next committee of the whole?
All right, that's my motion.
Yes, seconded by Councillor Neary. Discussion?
Well,
Hang on, Councillor Neary.
Thank you. I would like some time to step back and think about all the discussion that is taking place, has taken place, probably will continue to take place tonight. I think this is a really important, key recommendation that's going to come out of this committee, and I would hate to see it being railroaded through just because, this is how I think it should be, it's got to go, or, on my side maybe, no, I'm not going to support it. I want to reach a conclusion that we can all live with and support, because it will die on the vine and it will not have the same effectiveness unless we all understand what our purpose is, why we're doing it, and how we're going to achieve it. As far as corporate priorities are concerned, our strategic priorities, number one is the water agreement. After that, we've got communication, economic development, official community plan, First Nations relationship, village core plan. Number 4 on the next list is water master plan. Now, we have put a time frame in that for terms of reference and to start the process and move it forward, January, March 2016. As we've said earlier in this meeting, everything is kind of going in tandem. A lot of these plans, and I think maybe, I recognise that maybe, Planning Advisory Committee has a very specific connotation in municipal circles. Evidently it does. People tend to think about it. I get the impression it's more like a development advisory committee. And in fact, Councillor Coughlin got the gist of what I was aiming at. I'm thinking of an umbrella group that covers, plans within that council's got all those balls that are in the air. I think we do need to think carefully about it. Come to some kind of, as much as possible, come to consensus on what it is we want. I do not support at this point even a water advisory committee. I feel that it's just so narrow in its scope, and it relates to everything that we're doing or trying to achieve as a council in this community. So I'm reluctant to, throw all your eggs in that one basket and then maybe have to start forming separate committees for the OCP and for this and for that and for the other, which becomes very unwieldy. I agree with the Mayor that I think the composition is kind of tight. 3 people, 3 representatives from the community. It's a very small group and could become very weighted in one area or the other. I mean, let's face it, water is a highly politicised subject. So we need a broad cross-section, a broad representation of the community. But again, if we just use this as a very narrow focus, what happens with all those other areas that we are working on at the same time? So I don't know what you would call it, but I would exhort council to seriously consider a committee with a broader mandate. I don't know what you'd call it. Somebody come up with a suggestion. I don't know what it looks like.
Okay, Councillor.
Actually, that was the purpose of this task force, is to get that broad mandate with regards to water. Right now, there's a sense in the community from the residents I talk to that there's still pro-development mandate going on. where I think people are viewing it as a development advisory committee approach that we're taking. This committee now made it so that people who are suffering with water challenges felt they had an opportunity to now have their area identified, and we're not just identifying specific areas that feel they're going to be the first in line for water. We have no mechanism right now for how that issue is going to be addressed. Never in any OCP in this community, and I've been involved in a lot of them, have we talked about how water is to be disseminated amongst the residents or the neighborhoods of this community. This task force was going to do that. And actually, I think for a lot of people, they viewed this as a hope that this was going to bring water to their neighborhood, perhaps, and not just to specific neighborhoods that have been identified. So for me, and now that I hear we're going to look at maybe a development advisory committee tied with water.
That's not the word.
Well,
It's a privilege.
yeah, but I just, let me finish my speech.
Councillor Haim.
Well, when we go to a planning thing, before we've done an OCP review, to me, it looks like, well, that's what we're discussing now and putting it off. Like, I take exception to the fact that we're railroading this through. We're not. We've followed process. We basically, it came forward, we asked for a report from staff, which we've done that. I just want to make sure that all the residents in this community are going to be fairly heard on the issue of water. And where is that going to get done in an OCP review? Because I'm going to ask that. Is that traditionally a part of an OCP review, that we're going to identify the water concerns and issues for every neighborhood?
I guess that's it.
Well, generally speaking, you know, the OCP focuses on land use for the most part. Now, having said that, you know, I'm pretty sure that during our discussions with the community, servicing is going to come up. I mean, water is up top of mind for everyone, but, you know, in some areas, sewers might be just as big of a concern. But being new to the community, I'm still trying to get an understanding as to, you know, where those issues are and scale those issues in the various areas.
So just as a follow-up to staff, never in this community have we identified the water concerns in any neighborhood in this community to date. Everyone has spoken of concerns, but somehow we have to find a way, whether it be through this OCP review or through a different advisory committee, to identify the various neighborhoods that are struggling. It's not just one neighborhood, it's many neighborhoods. So, you know, in order to prioritize who gets water and follow our policies, somehow we have to build into our OCP process, if we're going to roll it into one, what neighborhood gets first priority? Because we also have to look at cost too.
Okay. Councillor Coulson, then myself, and then just a question on the motion. Sorry.
Give me I don't understand.
Oh, go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm in favor, or I'm actually in favor of deferring this task force motion. You know, for me, it just spawned out of an email from January 11th, I believe, prior to our meeting where this motion was crafted. And ultimately, you know, it did come from very technical discussions, so I don't think we should be dismissing how it did come about. At this point, we're just over a month later, and I find this to be a very knee-jerk reaction, and I think we do need to put more thought to this.
Okay, Councillor Coulson.
So I'm building on Councillor Haim's comments. This committee, there's a lot of bright people in this committee, a lot of engaged people in this community. If this task force is constructed properly, it can be a real asset to staff, a real asset to council. I see this not as a political element-based recommendations where, oh, well, we've heard a couple people in the wind saying they want water, you need to send water there. Absolutely not. The recommendations will be based on facts, numbers. So, you know, this area needs X connections of water because of bad quality. This area needs X connections for bad quantity, that type of thing. They pull the community. They look at water supply options. How many gallons a minute can we get for what cost? All very fact-based. That percolates through the system in whatever fashion it should. And so, you know, lots of discussion on technical competency. I don't see it that way at all. We're not going to be producing drawings with this group. It will be a group of competent people, not necessarily 7 hydrogeologists, right? Lots of people out there with skills in troubleshooting, you know, basic scientific method. And it can be a very powerful group if we choose to let it be so. Way back when, Brad was commenting on some of the construction that I fully agree with. Lots of talent in the community to draw from. I also agree with the composition, or the numbers. I think it is too low. Certainly some more members of the community at large would be good. Get a broader representation, maybe geographically or what have you, but also lets you pull from a bit of a different or broader talent pool, maybe. So, thanks.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. McGregor.
Your Worship, just the date is March 21st, and you're going to execute the whole meeting as the Windsor Financial, so just the motion is missing a date.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And just for clarity on the motion, it was, the committee refers the motion on the floor to the March 21st, 2016 committee of the whole meeting for staff to provide a report. Is that it?
Councillor Giselberg, I believe you were the mover of the motion. What do you expect? Do you expect staff to provide anything additional for the March 21st meeting, or do you just expect council to kind of chew on it? Chew? Apparently we're just going to chew. Okay.
Point though, attention was drawn to the fact that the 21st is a financial committee of the whole, is that correct?
No, that March 21st is the open meeting.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, the 7th is the...
You're saying very well too.
Actually,
So hang on.
sorry, could we move it to March the 5th, the next meeting? Only because Councillor Colson will not be here and he wants to provide input into this discussion?
You mean to the council meeting?
Yes.
Well, it's a committee meeting.
Or can we move it to the one in April then?
Well, there wasn't necessarily.
Should there's budget.
There's a financial plan on April 4th,
You don't want
and
to do
council
it
could
the same.
schedule
One other
another
step in there,
meeting.
I forgot it. I'm just reading this today.
I just think that it is important that all
12:50,
council be involved in
circa
this.
12:50.
So I don't have a problem coming back and chewing it around some more, but I think the intent needs to be that, because actually, Councilor Gutschlag might be away. When are you away? You gotta pay attention here. So when are you
We're talking about the scientific method.
March.
So what I was just saying here, because as Councillor Hain pointed out, Councillor Colson won't be here at that meeting. And I think this is a good example of maybe a practice that we should adopt, that for topics that are as important as this, we don't deal with them unless all the council's here. And so, like I was saying there, I don't have a problem chewing this over and maybe having another discussion on the 21st to try and further develop it. But ultimately, I think we need to go to the April meeting that you referred to as well, just so that we have the full council here before we make a decision.
Don't look at us at once, Your Worship. We're just discussing when we're trying to fit this in.
April 4th is the last financial plan meeting. So I'm trying to...
We're just trying to avoid muddying the waters of financial plan with anything else, because it is quite heavy. So
What if we, recognizing that we can schedule extra meetings if need be, as much as we don't like to do that, recognizing some question marks with regards to possibility of attendance, and I don't want to lump it on top of a financial plan meeting. If we don't have one specifically scheduled currently, could we not do it to a date to be determined until we establish a date?
yes.
Is that all right?
Give us the month you want to do it.
April.
Okay.
Is that all right with the moving and seconded?
Lots of time to chew.
Okay. I want you guys to think about something while you're chewing. Water is highly politicized, okay, and especially in this community. And it has been for a long time. It isn't just recent. It's been going back a long time. My hesitancy to tie it to an OCP group is because historically OCP discussions in some cases surrounding water have been used not to determine what's good development, but to stop development because of the connection between water and the OCP side of things. You know, for example, just erasing the lines. I mean, as a general concept, people believe they have the right to water. But within the OCP, there's a line for a water service area that may or may not match up with an urban containment boundary in that respect. So we have to stop and think about those aspects when we're trying to decide whether or not to move them together. And that's why a task force or advisory committee like this, in my opinion, has a shelf life. Because once you reach a certain point, it's just pure operational. There's no policies. Policies are in place, staff enforce the policies. Having said that, one of the reasons for a desire to move this part forward earlier rather than later is we do actually have a policy. And that policy speaks to, upon securing an additional water supply, the following procedures will apply. Some of the things that need to be done include water capital planning, DCCs, water connection fees, water parcel and user fees. But there's also, upon payment of all applicable fees and charges to the district, connections and or extensions will be allocated on a first-come, first-served basis.
Which policy is this?
3007-3, implemented November the 6th, 2006. When it comes to that, there's some broad-based things about having to pay for pipes and that sort of an aspect there. But there's also a little clarifier down the bottom that says Director of Public Works has the ability to restrict the creation of new water connections in the interest of the public and the efficient operation of the municipal water system. In the interest of the public, if I'm a staff member, that scares the heck out of me. Because good luck in trying to figure out that one.
Well, it's a tentative mini clause.
Well,
But it's still on some staff.
well, and that's the problem, is it puts the onus on staff with no guidance as to what that really means. And so that's one of the things I would expect something like the Water Advisory Committee to consider and provide recommendations on, which ties in things like the survey of the residents. I said, if you tie it to the OCP, it really makes the danger of becoming even more politicized. Because people will say, well, I don't need water because I don't want a house next door. Well, but the guy down the street needs water. So anyway, chew on that, and send it in April. Councilor Coco.
Good comments. I'm not absolutely married to one committee, and certainly I'll chew that over, but I'll also chew over the option of having a separate water advisory committee. And as you've alluded to there, I mean, one thing that it may be able to do is slightly or a quicker pace, go through the exercise of at least looking at who wants water. That exercise, which could feed into the OCP. I just had some difficulties with the terms of reference that were laid out there, but this has been a really good conversation, and I'm going to be chewing over both options.
Question?
All those in favor?
So this is for deferring.
Yeah, deferring until a meeting date to be determined in April, or for April. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
I will say this, I enjoyed that discussion. Anytime we see water, there's a tendency to, oh God, where's this thing go?
If you want water tonight, bring a bucket, come up to Andrew Crescent. It's flowing down the street.
Actually, we need public participation.
It's always on your shoulders.
No pressure though. Okay. So based on that then, Councillor Neary has something she'd like to say. Seconded by Councillor Hayden. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.